Are you confident in your offers but wishing more people actually saw them? If you're ready to get your voice in front of dream clients without chasing every algorithm, the Visibility Kickstart Fall Flash Mini is for you. In just a couple of days, you'll walk away with custom podcast speaking topics, a simple system to track your pitches, and direct voice messaging support from me, so you can start landing guest spots and planting visibility seeds before the year ends. No long program, no fluff, just action, clarity, and major visibility. You'll be ready to pitch this week. Spots are limited, and this is only good for October. Head to the link in the show notes, and let's get your message into more ears starting now. All right, this one is all about what to do once you've gotten booked on the podcast. What are you going to say when you get on this show? This is more common than you think. And without being in the podcasting world, let's say, you may not really think about how a podcast episode flows. So that's what I'm bringing you here today, as being a host and producing my own episodes, as well as other people's shows for the last 4 years, and guesting on upwards of 50, 60 shows just in 2025 myself. So bringing all of that together with a nice, neat bow, deliver it to you. So you've gotten booked on a show. You are pumped. You are excited. There's 3 parts. Think like you're writing an essay back in high school. It's like beginning, middle, and end. Those are your 3 parts. I like to call them the intro, the value, that's where you're the expert, and the outro. So we're going to get into all of those because I want to make sure that you don't leave this feeling like you talked about everything. You gave your entire life story. You aren't going to see necessarily the growth, the impact that you could if you would follow these tips. So let's get into it, because there's nothing more frustrating than being super stoked. You get on the show and then you get cut off because you're rambling, you don't have a plan, and you haven't really even given it any thought or intention. You don't have the strategy behind it. I want to make sure you have that, especially when we're trying to use podcast guest speaking as a vehicle to grow our business, grow our network, increase our visibility. That means that we need to treat it so, and we need to have a little strategy. And so we can't just get on the show and, just riff and be super excited. So I got cut off in my first interview. I'll tell you that. Years ago, I was in the shoes of being stoked, excited, so thrilled, no plan, just going to spew whatever came out. And that's what I did. I got on. She said, "Hey, welcome. Tell me about yourself. Who are you? How'd you get here?" And I went into life story, every single pivot, all of the things. One negative about this is, well, there's a lot, but one is that you've now cut off a good chunk of that episode, especially for the shows I'm on a lot that are very mompreneur friendly, where we are short on time. We want to get things going, like my show. And so if it's a 20-minute episode, you have cut off a 5-minute, 7-minute chunk. That is a huge fraction of that episode. So things that you want to do in that introduction, obviously you say your name. Who do you help? I know it's kind of boring to think about I help statements or whatever. So you can rephrase that, but you want to say that. You want people in the beginning to have that thought in their head of what you do. Like, I'm a podcast guesting strategist, mentor, coach, that type of thing. You're going to find words to explain that. And if you can figure out a way to work in a transformation, the result that your people get quickly, then go ahead and do that. So you're going to keep this short. This is like a 60-second thing, maybe 90 seconds tops. You want to keep it clear. You don't want to give the entire backstory, but you might mention things like I do often say, I've been hosting podcasts for 4 years. Because of that, I get bad pitches. I get emails every week, if not every day, where the pitching of guests to be on my show is just terrible, to be quite blunt and frank. It's not good. It's not aligned. They haven't listened to my show. They might spell your name wrong. So I saw that and I saw a need. And that's what I was getting questions about. And that's how I got here. And now I help people guest on shows as a way to grow their business network and leverage their offers and their expertise through speaking on other people's podcasts. So you keep it nice and short. I might mention that I used to be a teacher. That way, if you drop those little bits, the host can then ask you, because they know their audience better than you do, they can now ask you specifics. If they want to go down a certain road or how you left this or the story, they can take you there, but they know more than you do about their audience. So let them drive that and keep your intro about yourself nice and short, because that second part, the middle, that's the value. This is where you have niche speaking topics. So I feel like a broken record, but I still can't say this enough. Before you start your podcast guesting journey is such a cliche word, but before you start partaking in this, before you start looking for shows, before you start saying, I want to guest on podcasts, what are your niche speaking topics? What 2 to 3, the more specific, the better, speaking topics could you get on a show and provide a ton of value for? Okay? Because that's how, when you get on the show, this middle chunk where the host is asking you questions, that is how those questions are going to be in your wheelhouse of expertise. This is where you are positioned as the go-to thought leader in your industry, because the host, you are borrowing their trust that they've already created with their audience, and you are speaking directly to this niche topic. They're going to ask you questions right specifically about this. So if you don't do that, that's when you get off-topic questions, things you don't feel that comfortable answering. It makes you uncomfortable, right? So it also can lead the conversation in a way that when people go to your social media or somewhere after, it might not match. So we want to have everything match, because that's part of the experience of somebody hearing you for the first time, deciding to go follow you, and maybe then signing up with you or buying something from you because it matches and they feel that trust and they feel that authenticity and it seems like a fit, right? We've been burned too many times, unfortunately. And so we need this. We need this to all match up. And you do that by making sure that you have niche speaking topics. And this is where you can give actionable things. You don't need to give away everything here and tell everything. Honestly, a whole podcast episode isn't enough for that anyways. But if there is 1 or 2 things that someone can go and do after based off what you've said, that's fantastic. I think that's all we're really looking for when we're coming to listen to a podcast. We want to be inspired. We want to have a little direction in what type of action we're going to take. And if you can provide that, that's fantastic. You don't need to give away every in and out of exactly what you do, but making sure that there's something, because nobody likes to get done with an episode and feel like it was just a gatekeeping. They never got to the real parts. That doesn't need to be big. It doesn't need to be like this overthought thing, because your story and your process also is the value. It's how people can see, the next step. There's value in that too. So don't look at value as like, I have to just like give something away, or I have to, give this downloadable or this video. It's not always about that. And honestly, sometimes that's too overwhelming. And it's too much for what everybody has going on in their business and life today. So if you're hearing this part though, and you're like, okay, but how do I even figure out what my niche speaking topics are? I am drawing a blank, or I don't know how to position them, or I don't know how to make them niche. They're very broad. Maybe it's like email marketing. Maybe it's like website design, SEO, but like, how do I get it specific? How do I convey that? You need my Flash Fall Mini Visibility Kickstart, because that's exactly what I'm doing. You're going to fill out something really quick. And then I'm going to kick you back with those niche speaking topics. I'm going to put them as podcast titles, and you're going to be able to use these to pitch, post, and start landing aligned podcasts to be in front of and really take your visibility to the next level. If we're thinking about how we want to start 2026 in business and build that momentum, this is a great thing to start doing right now. Even if you're catching this episode way later, it doesn't matter. The time is now. There's no magical starting time, but when you hear about this, don't sleep on it. Don't wait on it. There's people like, I know are already looking for your services, but you're not in the right room. And that's what podcast guest speaking can do for you. So if you are stuck on this, like topics, how do I do this? I'm going to pull those topics out for you in this little mini bundle. You can head to the show notes, because then you'll be able to run with this. We're going to have 2 days of voice messaging access together that I can really help you. And I'm going to deliver these custom tips and speaking topics and a little tracker, because nothing more than I love than a little streamlined system and efficiency. So I'm going to bundle that up for you and send that to you. So I have limited spaces for this. So get in on that. Third part, I said there's 3 parts. When you get on the show, what are you going to talk about? Third part, the outro. Don't blow this part. This gets overlooked because you get through the value and you're like, whew, I made it. Other tip quick for the value part. If you think you're going to blank, I work with a lot of moms and we have mom brain or pregnancy brain. We're like, what if that happens to me while we're recording? First of all, a lot of shows edit. It's a very controlled environment. They want you to do well. They're not going to let you sit there on dead air. But just put down a couple Post-it notes. If there's like 2 or 3 pieces of value that you want to make sure you hit, that's what you put down as notes. Put those Post-it notes in front of you. A quick glance down, boom, you're back on track. Okay, the outro, third part. This part we overlook because it happens in like seconds at the end of an episode. But this is important. This is huge. One thing you can do to make this a mistake is to try to send people to a lot of different locations. So let's say you have a lot of free resources, because so many of us have more than one thing. That's awesome. But that's going to lead people to not act. What we know, if there's too many decisions to be made, then we're not making a decision. So that's like decision paralysis. We're not going to do anything. There's going to be no action. It's going to end there. Send them one specific place. So one free download or one free thing or one place to go to. So for me, every platform I'm on is at Candace Dudley, so that I can say, you put my name in, you're going to find me. So that is specific. And I did that intentionally. So that doesn't mean that that's not how yours is set up, that that's a problem. Just pick one of them to send them there. Just come hang out with me on Instagram, because the host at the end of the episode is going to say, where can people hang out with you? Where can we find you? This is where you're going to plug if you have a next step. So, and you need to have a next step. So do you have a place to send them? Because we want the people that have listened to this entire episode, if they're still listening, they're interested and they're aligning with you and they're liking your vibe, send them to your space, your community, where we want to move them. That's the magic. That's where we want to shift them into your space. So do you have an email list that you can plug because you give great tips or something there? Do you have a free download you can plug? Do you have, a social media set up? And wherever you want to nurture them best, that's where you're sending them. Once they're there, then you can tell them about your other 4 free resources that are phenomenal, or this or that, the other. It's too overwhelming to give all of that in one podcast episode. So be clear, be specific, send them somewhere. Don't overthink this, but make sure you have somewhere to send them, because an email list, fantastic. Something that catches their email. So that's what I mean by like a free resource that they can plug in an email address. You get their email address, they get the free thing. That's just the system that's going to be able to keep things moving and working for you. But honestly, if you nail that middle part of that value and you were specific because you were speaking to a specific topic, one, doesn't mean you don't have other topics that you can speak to. It just, on that one episode, that's all we have the attention spans for. And when you get done, you know who gets asked the most questions, or, hey, I need someone to help me with X, Y, and Z. Podcast hosts get asked that. That host is your best friend, your new bestie, especially the ones that the hour of recording flew by and you are like, this was phenomenal. This was the best hour of my day. Stay in contact with them. Follow them on social media. Cheer them on. Interact with them, because they are the ones that when someone comes in the next week and says, I know you don't do this, but who do you know that can help me with X, Y, and Z? You're going to come top of mind. That's how those referrals start to trickle in, because I know for a fact that people turn to podcast hosts to ask them for, who can I go find? Give me a referral, because that's the easiest thing. At least when I'm buying something or signing up for a service, if someone recommends them that I already know, like, and trust, I'm in. I don't need to research you. I don't need to scroll your stuff. I don't need to go to your website. I'm signing up. And that's that. Because as long as we have that genuine human interaction where we can say, hey, I trust that person, you can go trust them too, that's where you're going to get the referrals. So if you nail that niche speaking topic part, that's going to be great. And as we wrap this up here, those 3 parts, like I said, the intro, middle, and outro, that's how you master a podcast episode. That's the flow of every episode I've ever been on. And it's all about the conversation, the connection you're making, the deep dive conversation you're having with that host, and being really authentically yourself. If we don't have that piece and we're just a robot out there, that's why I think people are turning to podcasts, because we have so much AI generated content and you can't tell if they actually wrote it or if a computer wrote it. You can't hide it and you can't fake it for a 20-minute to an hour-long podcast interview. At some point, it's you that's coming across, and I love that. And I think people listening to podcasts love that. So don't be afraid to be yourself, or keep being yourself as best you can as you step into you more and more and more. Because I know that from my start 4 years ago with my podcast to now, I have baby toe stepped into the most authentic version of myself every single episode, more and more and more, and you will too. Don't forget, if you want my support with those niche topics, getting those nailed down and kickstarting your visibility, head to the show notes, get in on that flash ball mini visibility kickstart. All right, see you next week. All right, that's it for today. If this episode gave you a little aha, or you're thinking about guesting on podcasts now, I'd love to hear about it. Screenshot the episode, tag me on Instagram at Candace Dudley, and let me know your biggest takeaways. And don't forget to come back next Tuesday for another episode.